everybody. Welcome. I'm going to be sitting here talking with my old friend, Howard Bloom. And, some of you guys are probably pretty familiar with Howard. Some of you are probably not. I just want to let everybody know that Streamlabs and Super Chats are open. And you can ask questions of me or Howard or just make whatever sort of comment or random-ass bullshit you want. Howard, would you like to introduce yourself to the people out there who might not know you?
Well, I'm the author of 7 books. I appear on 545 radio stations once a week. My background is in theoretical physics and microbiology, but I went into, of all things, I was hunting for the ecstatic experience, dark underbelly where new myths and movements are made. So I took my science and I went into PR in the music industry and founded the biggest PR firm in the music business and worked with Michael Jackson, Prince, Bob Marley, Bette Midler, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Kiss, Queen, Run DMC, Billy Joel, Billy Idol, Paul Simon, Peter Gabriel, and then went back to my science and have been soaring, absolutely soaring ever since.
I'm being told by my YouTube chat that I am ageist for describing you as my old friend. So I apologize for that, Howard. I don't mean to be
Well, I am your old friend.
Yes. How old are you?
In more ways than one.
How old are you, Howard?
I turned 77.
77.
I turned 77 on June 25th. Yes.
Wow.
And I do 1,202 vibrational plankings a morning. I walk 6 miles a day, and I'm stronger than I was when I was 19.
I like how the push-ups have changed to vibrational plankings. Now, I got to admit, we did have a good laugh. I saw the trailer for your documentary, and I saw what you were calling a push-up.
So you know why?
There was. I won't lie. There was a little bit of mockery on my part, but it was all in love. Because I don't know what I like the term though, vibrational planking, because it's it kind of looked to me like planking and head banging at the same time, you know?
Oh yes, it was. I've stopped the head banging. Now I keep my head still.
Oh, okay, thank God.
It's arduous. I thought I was doing push-ups, and then they came in to film the Grand Unified Theory of Howard Bloom, the 66-minute movie, which has won Best Picture at the Science Design Film Festival.
Yes.
And they shot me once, and the footage, and they came in, they shot me a second time doing my push-ups, and they weren't happy. I was doing 1,600 push-ups in the morning, and I have a gorgeous Asian house guest. I had her come into the bedroom at 8 o'clock in the morning with her iPhone, shoot me from the floor level doing what I was doing, and all of a sudden I realized I wasn't doing push-ups. I was doing a lot of head flinging, and my body was vibrating up and down, and I was planking with absolute perfection, but alas, no push-ups. So
well.
1,220 exercises with no particular name except vibrational planking.
I gotcha. I love it though. But I was reading a tweet of yours just the other day. You were saying, and I'm going to paraphrase badly here, but it was something along the lines of I can't really do what normal humans do, so I had no other choice but to do things humans can't.
Yes, exactly. Took a long time to figure out that's one of the aspects of my life. Look, I can't throw a ball. My dad never took me into the backyard and taught me how to throw and catch. And if he tried, I probably would have been utterly incompetent at it. I can't do team sports. Once upon a time, I was approaching a field in which the kids in my neighborhood were choosing up sides for a baseball game, and their bats and their balls and everything. They saw me coming. They literally picked up their bats and balls and mitts to find another field where I would not be able to find them. So I can't do that stuff. When I was in first grade, my first grade teacher called my mom in and said, "Look, you got to take him for psychological testing. He's mentally retarded." And my mom took me in for the psychological test. She never told me what the results were. But so I wasn't good in school. I mean, I read 2 books a day, one under the school desk and one when I got home, but I paid no attention in class, and I don't know where Kansas is on the map. So no, I can't do normal things. And then one day I was at a rock concert. I had all access passes because I was a big shot, a VIP, at these concerts. And I went down into the 12th row to be with the people who were standing on their feet and clapping, and I clapped along with them. And I suddenly noticed something. When everybody's hands were out like this, my hands were clapping. And when everybody's hands were clapping, my hands were out like this. I automatically end up in the empty space that other people leave behind. And that's the only place it seems where I can exist.
Hey, at least it's a place where you can exist, So you were here in part, not just paying a social visit, but also to promote. You got a new book out. I'm going to go ahead and put the link up here.
Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me. Yes, The Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll. That's the one.
Yep, the link.
See that little picture on the cover? That little tiny nerdy superhero?
Yeah.
That's the guy who drew that is Chris McCullough. Chris McCullough had his first syndicated or broadcast TV animation when he was 23 years old, called The Tick. You've probably seen it. It's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I've heard of The Tick.
And I sort of acted as his psychotherapist for a couple of years, and he would come over to my bedroom when I was stuck in bed with an illness for 15 years and visit. He was trying to come up with his own series, because the first one, The Tick, he did with a partner, Ben Edlund. And he finally came up with something called the Venture Brothers. And the Venture Brothers is now in its 8th season. So Chris drew that little tiny Howard the Humongous.
Those seasons take a while too, because I think it's on its 8th season, but like it's 20th year or something like that. But yeah, that's a good show though. And you also have a new movie coming out, The Grand Unified Theory of Howard Bloom, which I think you said is going to be available for purchase on the 21st.
Yes, and the reviews have been spectacular, but the reviews of the book have been spectacular. The whole first few months of the book have been spectacular.
Oh, Howard, everything you do is spectacular, Howard.
Would that it were so, TJ. Would that it were so.
But yeah, the links for both of those are available right down there in the description down below, so anybody who's interested can check those out. Looks like the book is available in audiobook and paperback. If you got a Prime account and you have like free audiobook credits on Audible, you could just spend one of your little credits on that. I know I got a shit ton of credits myself, so I'll probably just use one of those to buy the audiobook version, since I've become too ADD to actually sit down and read printed words anymore. But yeah, that's all available. Links are in the description if anyone wants to check that stuff out. And also, that's how you give Howard money. The way you give me money is through Streamlabs and Super Chats, which are very much open and will be read at the end of the stream. And Howard will be sticking around with us to help answer some of those questions as well. So, with all that self-promotion and masturbation out of the way, what's going on in the world? I'll tell you. Let me start things off. So everyone hates 2020. I like 2020. Am I crazy for liking the chaos and the insanity that this year has brought to us? Everyone is always telling me that I must be mad.
Well, I'm having a good time. I'm going out and walking 6 miles a day in the park. The park is goddamn gorgeous. The park was designed by Frederick Olmsted. It's Prospect Park in Brooklyn. And it was his masterpiece. And Frederick Olmsted is the master of park design. So I get to spend time in the greenery every day, which is fabulous. And I'm doing interviews like crazy for Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me, A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll. And I have, I unfortunately lost the love of my life, who was in South Africa. And I was supposed to go see her in April. And then South Africa was shut down and the airlines were shut down and everything was shut down. So she got herself a live-in boyfriend who was more convenient than somebody who jets over every now and then. Damn. So I got a new friend. This one's in Maryland, and it's a little bit more convenient. And of course, with COVID, I may never get to see her in person at the rate we're going. So I'm having a merry old time. But you know, I have a wonderful time on the internet. So internet life is just fine by me. As for the rest of the world, it's hard for me to tell.
Yeah,
I mean, the big problem is that we have a president who makes me sick. And, you know, every week I do a radio show, 545 radio stations, usually Wednesday nights or Thursday nights. And it's been commentary on COVID for the last 3.5 months. And how do I do that? It's a Republican show and I'm their token Democrat and liberal. So how in the world do I say the current president has killed, as of this moment, 133,000 Americans? What do I mean by he's killed 133,000 Americans? Well, the Koreans started testing the minute they realized coronavirus is on the horizon. And they started isolating the people who were carrying it and contact tracing to find all the people that they've been in touch with and isolating those who'd also gotten the virus. And it worked. They have had somewhere around 287 deaths so far. Now, if you extrapolate that to the size of the American population, in America, if we had done the same thing, 2,000 people would have died. In fact, as of today, about 136,000 people have died. That means Donald Trump personally has killed 134,000 Americans through utter stupidity in handling this virus, through his own narcissistic, delusional way of looking at the world, in which this virus is a plot against him and a hoax.
What do you think about the logic, if you want to call it that, that the problem is we're doing too much testing and we're therefore, we're seeing too many cases because we're just doing too much testing. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, somebody this morning on TV said it's like saying if we did less pregnancy testing, there would be fewer babies.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, that's not going to work. If you're dead, you're dead, whether you've been tested or not.
And for those of you in the chat who are disagreeing with Howard, just remember, all you got to do to fucking get a message right to his ears is donate. So you can always do that. You can always give me money to talk shit. Throat to fling.
So what do you think of the state of the world right now?
Well, I mean, I'm pretty interested, because I feel like like recently I quit smoking. I'm on a diet now, and it's because I think a part of the reason why is because for the first time I'm kind of interested to see where this is all going. Because for a while I'm just like, yeah, humdrum, blah blah, status quo, but now there's so much chaos and so much uncertainty that it's like I'm invested again. Like, let's see what happens next. So for the first time in I don't know, maybe my entire lifetime, I'm kind of fascinated. I see this as like the dawn of the age of chaos, or an age of chaos, and I feel like only in times of chaos is actual change possible. So I'm looking at it from that perspective of like, I don't know what sort of world will emerge from the chaos or how long the chaos will reign, but I feel like this is the beginning of an age of chaos.
Well, it's the beginning of an age of chaos in which America has left its leadership position in the Western world behind. So the Western civilization is operating without a head right now, because the man in the White House has a head that only a person who's been poisoned would follow. So that means that the Western democracies are up against China. China is now united under a single leader for life, Xi Jinping. China has a grand vision, the Belt and Road, that connects 60 countries and 3.5 billion people. And there's a Belt and Road by land that'll take things by speed train, whatever you call those hyper fast trains, all the way from Chinese cities that produce goods to Lisbon in Spain, on the very opposite side of the Eurasian continent.
Oh yeah.
And they're enlisting one country after another.
Meanwhile, we have a D- infrastructure, right? So
what's that?
I said, meanwhile, we have a D- infrastructure.
Yeah, we have a D- infrastructure. We haven't done anything about it in the last, since the 1950s. That's a long time.
Right. I mean, a lot of our infrastructure is like from like FDR era, like fucking New Deal shit that we have. Like it's coming up on 100 years old, a lot of it. Like we have a lot of dams and bridges and stuff that were built in the 30s that are fucking dilapidated.
Right, and the Hoover Dam.
Yeah.
Right, and the TVA, Tennessee Valley Authority. And then there's our roadway system, which was built by Eisenhower in the 1950s. So we are way behind the rest of the world. And we have proven when it comes to the COVID problem that we are idiots. We are absolute idiots. We can't handle this thing. So the world cannot trust us to make good decisions anymore. And having Donald Trump at an international meeting of world leaders is like having the most rebellious, out of control kid in the, come in every day and destroy your entire classroom and the teacher's ability to teach. I mean, they can't hold international meetings because Donald Trump makes it all about him and insults everybody else in sight. Because he thinks, look, when Donald Trump was in second grade, he hauled off and hit his music teacher in the face and gave his music teacher a black eye, if you can imagine that, from a tiny little boy. And why? Because he said the music teacher didn't know a thing about music. What does that mean? At the age of 7, Donald Trump already felt he was a genius, a solid, whatever it's called, a solid genius, stable genius.
Stable, yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, and that he was the only expert on everything and anything in the world, and he didn't understand that his knowledge was total ignorance. And he continues to operate with total ignorance, believing that it is the most divine knowledge in the world.
Right.
The most accurate knowledge in the world. And as I said, that means he's killed 134,000 Americans.
You know, I'm having a little bit of trouble with your audio here and there. I mean, for the most part.
At this point.
Sorry. Hold on. Sorry, Howard. I'm having a little bit of trouble with your
interrupted.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of trouble with your audio here and there. I was wondering if you mind if I could just kill your cam.
What should we do?
I'm gonna try killing your camera.
No, kill the camera.
Yeah, I think that might help.
Do that.
And if it continues to be an issue, I'll kill mine and see if that helps. And if that doesn't help, then well, God help us at that point. But
yes.
No, I was just I don't know. I mean, I hear what you're saying on the Trump stuff, but I mean, Bush was a pretty dumb president, right? I mean, he was pretty beyond the pale horrible. We had the Iraq War, you know. So I mean, it's not like he's the first time we've had a fucking real idiot president. So I kind of wonder if we can really lay all this at the feet of Trump. Like, isn't he just like a symptom of a larger problem that's been festering in America for quite some time?
You could say that, but America, every culture always has a bunch of subcultures.
Right.
And they're always competing against each other.
Sure.
And what are they trying for? What's the ultimate prize? Well, in America, it's to get the presidency. And if you get the presidency, you take over the eyes and ears of the entire culture.
Right.
And there is a 35% subculture. It's only 35% of the American population, maybe 42%, that is gung-ho Trump. And they believe, as he believes, that he is the answer to everything. And it's a messianic cult. It is a cult of personality, the kind of thing we used to hear about with Mao Zedong and leaders and Stalin and leaders like that. And people believe in him with religious ferocity.
Mm-hmm.
So they think that every move he makes, that he is the great disruptor, that there is something called the deep state, and that if he can get rid of the deep state, America will suddenly be chaste and pure again, in some way that reminds them of 1952 when they were children or when their parents were children. The magical mystery time. Well, the magical mystery time, the American paradise of the 1950s did not exist. We had problems up the kazoo in the 1950s. We had polio.
Right. I always wonder when they say like "Make America Great Again." I'm always like, so when exactly was that? What exact year are we trying to get back to here? You know.
The real consequence is make America small again, because the easy part is demolishing things. The hard part is building things.
Right.
And this man, Donald Trump, can't build anything, which is ironic considering that he built Trump Tower. So apparently when it comes to bricks and mortar, he can build things. But when it comes to any kind of social movement, he can build a wild and crazy following that believes he's the Messiah, but he can't build any governmental structure that will accomplish anything. He dismantled we had an entire apparatus dedicated to spotting potential pandemics before they could happen. It was based on what we had done to the Ebola crisis, where we had contained it in Africa. The idea was spot it early, contain it where it is, and keep it from getting here. And Donald Trump disbanded. He said, I'm a businessman. I know that when you fire people, you can always hire people. Well, how many people in the commercial sector are paid to spot pandemics? 0. So can you really hire people who are specialists in pandemics? No. You have to keep them on the payroll of the government. Only the government can afford to do something like that. And the result is the shambles that we see currently with the COVID crisis. And we all know that in the fall, it's going to be ferocious. In the fall, it's going to get much worse because the normal flu is going to return. And that kills up to 61,000 people a year. And basically, the coronavirus is killing 250,000 people a year at the current rate. It may kill more than that. It gets totally out of hand. We send our kids back to school. The CD says that kids carry the coronavirus. No, they do not get the COVID illness, but they do carry it. So who do they carry it to? Well, every parent knows that any flu or cold that's going around in your kid's school is going to hit you. You get disease after disease after disease from your kid. Well, this just happens to be a disease that's 4 times as lethal as the common flu. And the common flu is pretty damn lethal. 40,000 to 61,000 deaths a year. That's more deaths than auto accidents. So the flu kills more people than auto accidents. But the coronavirus kills more people than auto accidents, the flu, household accidents, and murders combined.
I always like the whole. I like the murders. That's my favorite one. That's my favorite cause. You know, I actually I don't know. There is something kind of comforting. I don't know. Have you ever watched? I don't know if you watch much TV. You probably don't. I love this show Forensic Files. They talk about all the.
Oh, no, I don't know it.
Oh, that's all the murders and stuff. But they have a guy with a real soothing voice read it. So a lot of times I'll go to bed, you know, listening to his very soothing voice while he's talking about like, and she was stabbed 42 times, you know. So, but it's relaxing because, you know, because the voice is, he's got like one of these like really velvety voices. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, I mean, COVID-19, pretty fucking crazy. I saw this story the other day about the girl who got the lung transplant. They were showing her lungs that had to be removed, and they were just like, they looked like they'd been like cooked in oil or something. I mean, it was just brutal. You know, there was a story the other day about the guy who, you know, you could like read a story through his social media post. They show his post from like a few months back where it was like, oh, you know, this COVID is no big deal. And then the next picture they show is like a few weeks after that, he's at a pool. He's like, there's barely anyone here. And then the next post after that is like, man, this COVID sucks. I'm having trouble breathing. And then the next post is just his obituary. So it's like, oh, it's fucking brutal.
That's amazing.
Died on the 4th of July too. And he was like a big, you know, Trump dude, you know, flag waving kind of guy. But, you know, I totally see what you're talking about with that cult of personality thing, though, too. Hold on. Let me just one thing. I totally see what you're saying with that whole cult of personality thing, too, because, I mean, I've known some Trump. I have friends and family. I was with a family member who was a big Trump supporter. And, you know, he said to me outright, like, you know, all the stuff that's going on right now, I'm just so glad Trump is president. You just, you know, it's a load off my mind. It's a load off my mind. And I'm just like sitting there like, how the fuck is it? What? How is it a load off your mind, man? It's just, he's like one of the worst fucking presidents. But yeah, I don't get it. I don't get the cult of Trump. I guess it's because he's like an entertainer, right? He comes from that entertainment background. He does the little razzle dazzle. And you know, I guess the whole, like, he's aided by the whole post-truth reality where he can just kind of like make up whatever he wants and people just believe that over facts. Is that kind of how it goes?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Very much so. But there's something people overlook. In The Apprentice, the guys who created The Apprentice created deliberately this image of Donald Trump as a master of the world. Mm-hmm. So there's an opening to the show, an intro. And it's got Donald Trump up there on the 59th floor or something like that, of Trump Tower. And he's looking out over all of Central Park and half of Manhattan, and he looks like he's the king of the world. And they deliberately promoted this image of this guy who is the omniscient businessman. They promoted him as a god on earth. Yeah. And people apparently, I mean, it went through what, 13 seasons?
I have no idea how many seasons.
So a lot of people watched it and got that message. And Trump sold himself as what I used to call the magical messiah, because I was reporting on the entire campaign of 2016 for Coast to Coast, the radio show that I do, week after week after week after week. And he's a con man. You know, what did he teach his kids? First of all, what does his dad teach him? You have to be a killer. When you get up every morning, there are the gazelles and there are the lions. The gazelles get eaten, the lions eat them. You have a choice to be a gazelle or a lion. His dad used to say, I want killers, to his 3 sons, that they had to be killers, that if they had an opposition, they had to not just beat the opponent, they had to destroy the opponent. And this is how Donald grew up. And so he's mean as all hell. In fact, Karen Timmelsy's piece in the Washington Post on Mary Trump's book, his niece's book, or
the one that just came out. Yeah, she has a niece. Yeah.
Right. It says that in the Trump family, cruelty was handed down like an heirloom rocking chair. So Trump has got all these characteristics, but he's also a con man.
Yeah, and I just want to add one quick thing. I don't want to interrupt the flow of what you're saying, but I do remember there was the magician Penn Jillette, who's he's he's to the right of either of us because he's like a right-wing libertarian guy, but whatever. He was talking about Trump on Joe Rogan, who I guess we've both been on Joe Rogan too. And Joe Rogan was talking to Penn Jillette, and Penn Jillette was talking about his time on The Apprentice, and he was saying that behind the scenes he felt like he never saw Trump. Like he said, Trump has no sense of humor whatsoever. Like he'll tell joke, like the only kind of jokes he tells is like mean-spirited jokes, but he has no actual genuine like mirth or camaraderie with people. It's just like he's just a big fucking bloviating bully basically. And it kind of attests, I think, to what you're talking about of him just having like a cruel and sort of that cruel disposition. I also remember the fucking time when he was on Howard Stern's show talking about how some dude at a crowd at some event he was at fell down and was like bleeding, and Trump was just like very cavalier about it, like I wasn't going to help him because it was like gross. I don't want to touch blood or whatever. So it's like I guess you kind of do get that portrait of him. And it's kind of hard, I guess, I think a lot of times his stupidity maybe is a shield because, you really don't think about, like when I think about Trump, like the first thing I think about is like, he's an idiot and he's a demagogue. And it rarely occurs to me just how like cruel he is. You know what I mean?
Well, he likes to inflict pain.
Yeah. Like his sadism is kind of like more of a like an undercurrent.
Well, his ideal is to be tough and smart. And his role model is Vladimir Putin. His role model is really his dad. His dad
Putin
used to take him around when they were collecting back rents from people. And he was cruel and merciless in the process. Like, and Trump apparently picked that up. But Trump has trained his kids to be con men too. He had Soho in Manhattan. And it wasn't selling well. And in fact, the building had come online, the apartments had come online in 2008, and there was a huge crash in 2008. You couldn't sell anything in 2008. No one had any money in 2008.
Right.
So Trump's son and followed the family approach to things. He told people the Trump Tower was 80% sold, 80% of the units were sold. And if you didn't buy one really fast, you weren't going to get one because they'd be all sold. Do you know what the actual figure was for the number of units that have been sold? 20%. So that's the Trump family way of doing things. It probably goes all the way back to the first Fred Trump, who went to the Klondike from Germany in the 1800s because he was draft dodging. I mean, does Trump impress you as the kind of guy who would dodge the draft? He did dodge the draft.
Wasn't it? It was bone spurs. Yeah, the bone spurs.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So dodging the draft.
Now, in fairness to Trump, I would totally dodge the draft as well.
Being a coward and being cruel.
Yeah, I can at least I can empathize with the cowardice because I would definitely dodge the draft too. I'd be like, my bone spurs, man. They're back to whatever I gotta say.
Well, I accidentally dodged the draft because I married a woman with a 5-year-old child, and I one day something showed up from the draft agency and it said I had a AAA rating, and I thought, oh my God, that means I'm 3 times as valuable as anybody else in North America. And then I read more carefully and it said, no, you're exempted because you've got a child. Amazing. Who knew? So I wasn't enthusiastic about going to that war either. But Trump is very enthusiastic. He's telling the American people you have to be warriors in the face of COVID-19. What does he mean?
Well, he says he's a wartime president.
If 100,000 of you die, so what? What's that to me? As long as you stay faithful, loyal, and true to me, is what he's telling people. And he says things like, Obamacare is a nightmare. Everything is a mess that Obama ever did. I'm going to clean things up. I'm going to give you the healthcare system of your dreams. I'm going to exceed every dream you ever had. This healthcare system is going to be everything you ever wanted in life. Well, it's 3.5 years into the presidency of Donald Trump. And where's the healthcare plan? That's going to be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, the most gorgeous, astonishing, and brilliant thing you've ever seen. There's no sign of it anywhere. Why? It doesn't exist. Con don't have to produce. All they have to do is produce enough confidence on your part in these ecstatic dreams that they sell you, that you will give them your money. And that's the end of the transaction.
So let me ask you this. Trump 2020, what do you think?
I think he's going to win.
What do you think about his chance? You think he's going to win it?
Yeah, I think he's going to win just because he has some sort of dire magic. And that dire magic does appeal to a bunch of people. My girlfriend, she's busy looking for an alternative candidate. She doesn't like Joe Biden.
Right.
So she's looking around and she's looking at the whatever the solipsistic party is called, the Libertarian Party.
Right.
And every vote that doesn't go to get Trump out of office is a vote for Trump. Every Trump that goes to an alternative candidate other than Joe Biden is a vote for Trump. And since Trump is evil and morally corrupt and a killer, he's a mass killer. 132,000 or 134,000 deaths is a lot of deaths, and that's only in the first 4 months to 6 months of this crisis. We have another possibly 2 years to go. The Spanish flu of 1917 or 1918 wasn't just a flu of 1918. It was a 2-year flu. It went on until 1920. And it came in 4 waves. The first wave was in March. Sound familiar? That's when our COVID began. The second wave came in October. And it was far more deadly than the first wave. The first wave had been Mickey Mouse compared to wave number 2. And there were another 2 waves after that. So if this flu follows that pattern, we're in for this for 2 years.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So do you think that you think that even in the face of obviously the mishandling of COVID-19 and in the face of the social unrest around the whole Black Lives Matter movement and all these anti-police movements that have sprung up, do you think that Trump kind of ran as like he's going to bring order, right? He acted like I'm the law and order president. I'm the guy who can fix things and get things back to normal, to whatever his base considers normal. Obviously, this is not what they wanted. They didn't want a pandemic. They didn't want massive social unrest. Yet that's what they've got. So do you think that hurts him, or do you think he's going to play that to his advantage by saying, it's like I don't know what he'd say. Do you think that he's going to figure out a way to make that work for him?
It's going to help him. And it's going to help him for the following reason. His cultists believe the COVID is that, it's a problem, but it's no greater than the flu. It's no greater than auto accidents. You have to live with it just the way we live with the common cold. And that all of this hype about the COVID thing, that's Democrats trying to get our savior, Donald Trump, our magical messiah, out of office. And when it comes to all the demonstrations, hey, they're trying to take the police apart. If we don't have the police, we're going to have crime. You can see it right now with the increase in murders in major cities. So it's obvious that if those Democrats ever get hold of the government, murder is going to go up dramatically. The police are going to be disbanded. There's going to be a mess again. There's no there's no messiah in office we can count on to somehow carry us to the promised land, wherever the hell that is. Of course, it's an invisible promised land that will never exist, just like the healthcare system that we're all going to love doesn't exist.
But that was a short-lived one. He was like, "Yeah, we're going to do healthcare," and then he rolled out like the preliminary plan. Everyone hated it, and it just kind of vanished. So we got about attention
span of a gnat.
Yeah, we got about 960 people watching. Hold on one second. We got about 965 people watching right now. I just want to remind them all that Streamlabs and Super Chats are open and will be read at the end of the broadcast. And, if you want to say something to Howard, if you want to get him to answer a question or you have a contention with anything he's saying, you can always put it forth to him that way. It will be read at the end. Sorry to interrupt you, Howard. So I'm. All
right, look, let's go back to a basic.
I'll give you a freebie because there's. Let me just throw some disagreements that I'm seeing flow through the chat. So someone says Trump is by no means perfect, but he fights the establishment. So what would you say to something like that?
Well, one thing you realize when the establishment is gone, the way it's gone in Syria, that the establishment is what keeps things running. And if you destroy what we call the establishment, you're going to destroy the very foundations of the culture and society within which we live. and you're going to destroy all the things that you're accustomed to. You're going to, if you destroy the major corporations that bring you food, you won't have food. Or that bring you a 7-Eleven in your neighborhood, you won't have a 7-Eleven. Or that bring you a supermarket in your neighborhood, you won't have a supermarket. If you destroy the capitalists who build housing in America, you won't have housing. Without food, housing, and electricity, all of them brought to you by the establishment, by establishment entities like in New York City, Con Ed, you can kiss your life goodbye. You can kiss your life as you know it goodbye. And you may have a right to kiss your own life goodbye if you want to, but you have no right to kiss the lives of 330 million other Americans goodbye.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more anti-establishment than Howard is here, but to my way of thinking about it, Trump is the establishment. I don't view him as fighting the establishment at all. I mean, he's given massive tax breaks to huge corporations. He's been the best friend they could ever possibly have. He's done all this. He's done all the deregulation and tax cuts that every other Republican predecessor of his has done. I don't really see him as this anti-establishment guy. I mean, and the times when he is anti-establishment are when it doesn't make any sense. Like, let's get rid of the World Health Organization. Like, what? That's part of the establishment I happen to actually like. So let's keep. I don't know. It seems like he's only anti-establishment when the establishment's doing anything good. As far as the evil establishment goes, it seems like he advances their cause at every chance he gets. I
agree with you.
That's where I would be on it.
I agree with you. So there's a problem here. His fans perceive him as getting rid of the deep state, when in reality, as you said, those aspects of the society that are most disagreeable, he supports to the nth degree. So he's not getting rid of the deep state. He's, as you said, favoring another deep state over the one that actually cares about you and me. That's a little bit of an overstatement, because frankly, a corporation can't exist without caring about you and me. Why? Because if it doesn't deliver things that in some way sustain us or upgrade us or uplift us or empower us, it's not going to have any cash flow.
Right. Well, it cares about us. It cares about us as far as like consumption goes.
Yeah,
like we're consumers.
I'm very glad that some giant conglomerate produces Hellmann's mayonnaise for me, because I happen to love mayonnaise. We wouldn't have these things if it weren't for these giant corporations trying of all things to please us.
I consider myself anti-corporate, anti-capitalist, but I mean, I wouldn't say like, let's get rid of Hellmann's tomorrow, because I want that mayonnaise too. But I would say like we could transition away from certain aspects of that system. But, I don't want to get bogged down in that. I'm seeing more super chats and shit come along, so that's good. If you want, we could maybe go ahead and do a little dip into the audience questions right now, and we can always
go ahead.
We could always revisit them a little later, but I'm sure that they're going to be interesting. So let's go ahead and talk about. Let's start with some of the donations here. So someone asked, would Howard go to a DFF meetup once this virus is over? So DFF is Deep Fat Fried. That's my current podcast. Now, we do
anything you're involved in, I'll tag along like your Chihuahua.
Yeah, so it gets pretty drunk and raucous, but I think Howard would have a good time. I don't know, Howard. Do you drink? Are you a drinker at all?
No, I don't drink.
Not even on a like a rare social occasion. Just totally.
I think I had a glass of wine with my friend Bob Gushuni Jr. because he took me to a market, bought the food, wanted to show me what good eating was like, cooked the food for me, and part of the ritual was having wine. So I figured, okay, I'll participate in the ritual full blast. I'll actually have a glass of wine.
Wow.
I think that was about 11 years ago, and that's my only glass of wine in the last 30 years.
I am not a heavy drinker, but when I do drink, I drink. You know what I mean?
Oh, God.
Like, I was telling my wife the other day, we were watching Karate Kid. I'm a big cinephile, and I watch a lot of movies and TV. I was watching Karate Kid 2, of all movies. And there was a scene where I was telling her, where, like, they use, like, the minimal amount of force to restrain somebody. And I was explaining to her, that's not my philosophy at all. I'm anti-violence. I am anti-violence, but if I am forced to use violence, I'm going to use excessive violence, because whoever is the threat to me is going to be put down, or they're going to put me down, one way or the other. And I have the same approach to drinking, and I have the same approach to many things in life. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it all the fucking way. Anyway, Controde gave $5.
Well, wait. Let's say
Yes.
I'm drinking for a second.
Okay.
First, there's an irony.
Yes.
The irony is that my dad owned a liquor store.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is kind of
irony
ironic.
That my dad built that liquor store into the biggest liquor store in Western New York State. The irony is that my dad has been dead for, I don't know, 20 years or something like that. The liquor store that he founded is one of the biggest institutions in Western New York State. It's the Costco of liquor. So liquor put me through 7 therapists and put me through college.
See?
And yet I just can't stand liquor. But
yeah, it is kind of gross.
One day back in 2005, I had been invited to lecture an international conference of quantum physicists in Moscow.
Yeah.
And it was a 3-day conference. And I gave my lecture and I explained why everything you know about quantum physics is wrong. Mm-hmm. And all the guys in the audience, just all these physicists, sat there beaming like they were my proud uncles. I couldn't figure out why. But the last night, they had a banquet. Okay, you sit down at your seat at this long, long banquet table. And in front of you is peach brandy, grape brandy, God knows what kind of brandy, vodka, all kinds of bottles and a lot of glasses. So we got a lecture from the guy who ran the conference, and it lasted 20 minutes. And I thought, what the hell is he doing? Doesn't he know we're hungry? And when he finished, all the guys around you filled every single one of your glasses with alcohol of some kind or another, and filled all of their glasses. And then they all gave a toast. Okay, fine. Then I drank with them. I drank the stuff we toasted with. And then another bloody guy got up and gave a 20-minute talk, keeping us from dinner even further. But when he finished, the guys around me all filled up every single glass on the table, and we all toasted again. Well, by the 5th toast, we were getting a little slosh. By the 5th toast, when the time for the toast came, we were all standing on our feet and clinking glasses so hard that glass should have shattered. And we were roaring. So now I knew what look, Peter the Great planted himself in Holland way back in the 1700s because the Dutch were masters of shipbuilding and he wanted to learn shipbuilding. So he was like you. He was 6'4" or something like that. Yeah. And he had all of these Russian friends with him. And the neighbors couldn't stand him. They couldn't stand him because every night they would do toast after toast after toast until they were roaring at the top of their lungs in their drunkenness. And none of these nice Dutch people could get any sleep. So what I learned from this experience is, because I have no idea why people use alcohol, but what I got from the experience is alcohol is a tremendous bonding drug. I mean, you get so chummy with the people that are around you. You get so warm and friendly, open to them, that it's absolutely ridiculous, and they never lose your system.
Yeah, it does. It breaks down the social barriers. Yeah, it breaks down those social barriers a little bit. I said it breaks down the social barriers. Yeah. Hold on, I got to get through a few more of these. Controde gave $5. It says, it's been a while. Glad to see you are still keeping in touch with Howard, of course. I do.
Great.
Oh, yeah.
I'm glad somebody else enjoys it as much as I do.
Let's see here. We got a few things. I think there's some of our questions for you. TJ, how/where do you comment on your Patreon streams? What do you mean? I don't have time to do a explainer to you. I don't even know what you're asking me. Project Mathesar gave $5 and says, for Howard, true or false? Not all anti-Zionist or anti-Semitic, but all anti-Semites are also anti-Zionist.
Sounds true.
Okay. Secular Atheism Foundation gave $20 very generous dollars and says, for Howard, what if dark matter behaved in exactly the same way as luminous matter? What if the reason we can't see it is because at the nucleus, the atomic structure of dark matter is only a Planck length in diameter?
Well, that's an interesting idea, but the fact is that we don't know there is any dark matter at all. Why? Because we think there's dark matter because mathematically galaxies do not behave the way that the math of Newtonian physics or even Einsteinian physics says they should behave. And weird stuff is taking place. And the only explanation we've been able to come up with is, there must be a whole lot of matter that we can't see that would make the equations work for these galaxies. But we don't know that there's some form of matter we don't see that's causing the anomalies. For all we know, those anomalies are occurring because in the same way that Copernican the Copernican view of the solar system and the cosmos was wrong. Our view of the cosmos fails to take into account something vital. And we don't know what that vital thing is. But I'll tell you one thing. There is, if you look up Howard Bloom and Big Bang on YouTube, you will find my Big Bagel theory of the universe. And the Big Bagel theory of the universe says there's twice as much matter in this universe as we think. Why? Because at the very beginning of time, imagine a bagel, and you've got this tiny little infinitesimal hole, right? And the positive matter comes out of the top side, and the antimatter comes out of the bottom side. And they shoot away from each other until they get to the hump of the bagel, and then they begin to call with each other with their common language, gravity. And they begin to fall toward each other the way a cannonball falls after you shoot it. And they accelerate at greater and greater speeds till they reach the very edge of the bagel, outer edge of the bagel, and they annihilate and become another singularity, another tiny little center of a big bagel.
So I
that's
have
the big bagel
a
theory.
Diagram of what Howard is talking about here. And I believe this is the proper diagram, right? This is the right diagram,
dark
correct?
Energy. Yeah, predicted the acceleration that we interpret as dark energy 38 years in advance.
Now,
38 years in advance.
I just want to
discovered it in 1998.
I just want to point out I am not a scientist. I don't know if I don't know what the veracity of any of this is, but it's here. But Howard's Big Bagel theory, which you can.
Yeah,
what do you have to search on YouTube? If you type Howard Bloom Big Bang, you can learn more about.
You'll get
about
it.
This.
Yeah, it's on YouTube,
yes,
and you'll get it.
Absolutely.
And it takes 5.5 minutes, and you'll understand the universe in a whole new way.
Oh yeah. Okay, so I have another question from John Holder, who gave $3.99. He said, "Howard, have you ever met Donald Trump?"
No. I've met a lot of interesting people: Prince, Michael Jackson, Buzz Aldrin, the 11th president of India, the former governor of New York State, who I'm working with right now, Newt Gingrich, a whole bunch of interesting people. But I have never met Donald Trump.
Darn. Goat versus Fish gave $5 and says, "Forgive us, TJ, but we would be remiss to not ask Bloom if he is goat or fish. Howard Bloom, answer as you wish. Are you goat or are you fish?"
Okay, I'm trying to figure out this dichotomy. What is the difference between a goat and a fish?
I think that you have to bring your own interpretation to it. You know,
I see. Okay.
I don't think that there's any sort of like
goats are remarkable creatures.
Yes,
because they are able to eat the stuff that other animals regard as trash. They literally are able to eat trash. But aside from eating trash, they're able to eat thorn bushes. They're able to eat this stuff that's much too rough for any other creatures. So they're able to turn what to every other creature is a potential tragedy into an opportunity. So, and fish, I don't know about fish. But that aspect of goats turning every disaster into an opportunity, hey, I can relate to that.
Howard chooses goat. Let's see. Para Ponera, I don't know exactly what that gave 2. I can never fucking remember which one's the pound symbol and which one's the euro symbol. I think that's the euro symbol. Gave 2 euros and says COVID-19 equals 9/11 2.0. I don't know how. I don't know how. I mean, in some ways, I guess they're analogous. But go ahead, Howard.
No, one is a definite attack by people who want to destroy our civilization and are very overt about wanting to destroy our civilization. They think our civilization is the most corrupt thing that has ever lived on the face of the earth. Why? Because the only real justice, the only real purity comes from Sharia law, comes from having one person ruling the whole world according to Sharia law. But there is no malevolent demon hates us behind COVID-19. There's just a very hungry organism that finds us to be food. That in the same way that that sheep eat thorn bushes, sees us as edible stuff.
Ian Jones gave $5 Canadian and says, "What do you mean post-truth reality? When were we living in a truth reality to begin with?" That's probably a pretty fair question. Yeah, I guess.
Well, I would say that ever since the days of Edward R. Murrow, the late 1940s and 1950s, it's been taken for granted. If you were a journalist, you have to fact check your stuff. You have to have 2 sources for anything. You have to tell both sides of the story, and you have to fact check every single word. Now, the mainstream media has slipped on that many times. I used to crusade against the slip-ups in the mainstream media. I got furious when the mainstream media wasn't adhering to the strict truth. But remember, fact-checking was a major deal. I still do it for every sentence of everything I write. Sometimes I do it 5 times over. Donald Trump has created a new reality in which no fact-checking is necessary. Any fact or figure that comes to his imagination is valid because he's the stable genius, and so anything he says is sanctified as a truth.
I'd like to give a slightly different answer, but I don't know if it's significantly different. But I guess I only use post-truth reality because because that seems to be the common term used for it. I don't know that it was preceded by a truth reality, but I do think that there was a time when the lies were more uniform and homogenized. Like I think that there was more of like a unifying lie, like God or honor or meaning or some larger concept that was like an umbrella. But now the lies are more individualized. Like reality has become like a choose your own adventure book where, if you say to yourself that the earth is flat, you can find a lot of people to agree with, and you can join the Flat Earth Club and be part of the Flat Earth team. And the same goes for a million and other crazy fucking fringe notions that, years ago you would have been, laughed out of town or considered the town nut job. But now you just find other nut jobs all across the globe, or the flat earth, if you will, to agree with you. So that's kind of what I mean by it. But I also agree with what Howard said, that there was a time when facts mattered a little bit more than they do now as well. So let's see. We have a few more that have come in. Goat vs. Fish. We already read that one. Ian Jones. Okay, so Small Mail gave $2 and says, "Who's Sanders' predecessor? Will they be effective?" I think it's way too early to tell that personally.
Bernie Sanders' predecessor,
yeah,
or successor?
I think they mean successor. They said predecessor. I believe they meant successor though.
Right.
But I don't know. I don't think we know that yet. Levelhead 199. How do we ensure Trump loses besides voting Biden? I think that's the best way to do it. I mean,
voting Biden is the only way to make sure that Trump loses.
Yeah, either that or just. Well, I don't even want to say what I was going to say. Stephen Fair gave $9.99 and says, "Howard, I totally disagree with your position that a vote for anyone but Biden is a vote for Trump. It's not voting for either mainstream candidate is a vote of no confidence in the system." That's from Stephen Fair, who gave $9.99. I know you have a refutation for that. So
yeah, it's also a vote of confidence in Donald Trump, because you're going to vote Donald Trump into the presidency, and Donald Trump is going to destroy every value America has ever stood for. Every value America has ever stood for, and he's making America small again. In fact, he's making America smaller than it was in 1890, less significant in the world than it was in 1890. That's a pretty big leap backwards.
Psycho Jet Black gave $1. Cyber Edge Punk Lord gave $5 and says, "Hey, Howard, thought on the rise of China's empire through the lens of their One Belt Initiative. A 25-year deal with Iran was made today." I know you have a lot to say about China.
This is the kind of grand vision for the future that the world has expected from America and has not gotten. Mm-hmm. But we do have a vision to counter it. It's just not in the White House. It's not in Washington. Mm-hmm. It's just south of LA near the airport, and it's Elon Musk. And his vision of planting a city on Mars and making life interplanetary, and the progress he's making in doing that, he's building this thing called the Starship, and it's going to carry 100 passengers and 110 to 120 tons of cargo, and it's going to allow him to make regular trips to Mars and regular trips to the moon. It's going to change everything. Yeah. So Xi Jinping has several what he calls Chinese dreams. One is the Belt and Road Initiative, and as I said, there's a naval component to that. He's trying to open sea lanes that China controls, because right now America controls the major sea lanes through which the world's cargo goes. He's bought himself ports in places like Africa and the Eastern Mediterranean. There is a port, Athens, is we consider it to be the very source of Western civilization. That's where Western civilization began, Athens. Well, Athens has a port, Piraeus. Guess who owns that port? The Chinese. So the Chinese are buying up ports all over the world, and they're going to have an enormous impact with the Belt and Road Initiative, because what they're trying to do is impose the Chinese way of doing things on the rest of the world. And that is an autocratic, dictatorial, totalitarian way of doing things that spies on you every minute of the day, and that constantly is deducting credit scores if you jaywalk or if you say something that's politically incorrect. Right. And believe me, everything is politically incorrect.
So
you can be thrown in jail for almost anything.
I want to ask a few clarifying points on that, because, I mean, you know, when you say that kind of stuff, I can't help but think of, like, the NSA warrantless wiretapping stuff we have here. I can't help but think, when it comes to, like, the social credit system, of the one that we've basically created for ourselves on social media, with, like, this whole, like, cancel culture kind of thing and all this stuff. You know, so I don't know if I feel like China's as different as your, you know, like, I don't know if the contrast is quite as drastic as what you're laying out, but you can try to convince me otherwise.
Well, it is. The difficulty is that many of the things that you and I have already said in this conversation would be deemed seditious in China, would be regarded as anti the Chinese nation, traitorous, and we could be thrown in jail in a definite period of time and periods of time for saying it.
But there's definitely stuff we can't say right now. You know, like, there's stuff that we can't say on this stream that, you know, could get us in trouble with either YouTube or with the public or with the government. You know, there's certainly limitations on our freedom to, you know, speak our minds, even now.
Yep, there are. No question. I mean, there are certain sexual things that we cannot talk about.
Sure.
The Me Too movement is just a latest manifestation of long-standing.
Well, I mean, not just sexual things, but there's certain, like, revolutionary things you couldn't talk about. You know, there's certain people that you can't say certain things about, in terms of, like, you know, there's, you know, certain things, even, like, jokingly, you can't make certain jokes about, you know, violence towards certain individuals or whatever the fuck. And I'm not saying that you should necessarily have the ability to do that. I'm just saying that it's not like we enjoy some sort of, like, absolute freedom now.
Well, if we have, let's say, 90% freedom, in China, we would have 50% freedom. And that's a big difference, because you and I live by our tongues.
Right.
You and I are talkers.
Sure.
You and I live by we have information flowing through us. I know I have information flowing through me 24 hours a day. Right. And I'm constantly synthesizing that information on behalf of my fellow human beings. So I am a mouth for hire. Not really for hire, because I don't do this for money.
That sounds kinky, honestly. You know?
Yeah.
You might want to watch that.
Do it for truth.
Phrasing. Yeah.
But back in my PR days, there was a magazine article that said mouth for hire. But basically, freedom of speech is the medium in which I live. It's the medium without which I could not live. And I would not have it in China.
I can feel you. Okay, so Transylvania Turf gave $20 and says $10 for you, $10 for your beard. So thank you very much. My beard is appreciative. Slagbit gave $5 and says, do you think that social media as it currently exists poisons human psychology? And if so, since it's not going away, how do you fix it? I don't believe that it poisons human psychology personally. I don't know where Howard stands, but he's free to elucidate if he wants.
It does the absolute opposite. The absolute opposite. We humans are built to interface with other human beings. And when we are not interfacing with other human beings, horrible things happen to us. We fall into depression. We can no longer think. Our mind becomes a gray goo. We get afraid to walk out of our own house, astonishingly. And our body goes through something called apoptosis, pre-programmed cell death. Our immune system goes into underdive. Our cognitive powers disappear. This is when we are in isolation, when we are denied contact with our fellow human beings. And we were denied contact with our fellow human beings when we were alone in an apartment or a room in the old days. Now, when we are alone in an apartment or a room, we're no longer alone. We pick up our cell phone and we plug in to our Facebook stream, to our to our Telegram, to our WhatsApp, to our Instagram, and we are in the presence of other people, even if no other people are physically present.
Mm-hmm.
And it means that we can be far more emotionally healthy than we would have been 40 years ago when isolation was implacable and when isolation began to kill us off. Now we live and thrive because we have constant human contact.
I guess that the counter argument, and I'm playing devil's advocate with this one. I guess the counter argument to that would be like, okay, yeah, we have this little screen that gives us some semblance of human interaction, but it's not the full shebang of human interaction. So a lot of people, they turn to that for this interaction, but then they neglect the more meaningful in-person sort of interactions that could exist. And I guess right now, because of COVID, that's probably the healthier thing to do. But in the absence of something like COVID-19, they're neglecting their like actual interactions, human beings face to face, having conversations and stuff like that, and instead relying on words on a screen to feel connected, but they're not really getting the full experience of that. How would you respond to that?
Well, you end up getting together with the people who become good friends of yours, especially who become lovers of yours on the internet, and you have that physical interaction. But every technology involves a trade-off. So once upon a time, 2,500 years ago, 400 years ago, there was a guy in Greece. And up until then, Greek culture was based on training every kid to memorize by heart every word of two books,
Mm-hmm.
the Iliad and the Odyssey. And a new technology had appeared on the scene that would make it unnecessary for kids to memorize those two books.
Okay, Howard, hold on. You're breaking up a little bit.
And this expert, to reconnect. Did we get reconnected?
Yeah, you're back now.
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that last sentence you did about the books.
Right. So this guy said, this is going to destroy the Greek mind. It's going to destroy the intelligence of Greek kids. It is the rigorous discipline of having to memorize the books that makes the Greek mind what it is. That new technology that he was against was called writing.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, books. What he didn't realize was there was a trade-off in the wind. And the trade-off was, instead of only knowing two books your whole life, you could have 120 books on your shelf. You could go to Alexandria to the library and have access to 10,000 books. It expanded your mind tremendously.
Okay. Let's move on. Field Clock 777 gave $4.99 and says, if you guys swapped lives, what would be the first thing you do? I don't know. I don't really know much about what Howard's life is like. I know that I would suddenly be 77 years old, so that would be a little awkward. I'm not really sure how life at 77 even works. Maybe I'd just go get totally shit-faced drunk, since apparently that's not something Howard does. I'd like to see what drunk is like in his 77-year-old non-drinking body. So,
well, I'm in better shape than I was when I was 50, so that's not a problem. But you'd be a flea. You'd be 5 foot 5 inches tall.
Oh my God, yeah, that'd be so weird. I wouldn't even know what to do.
Yeah, but you'd be able to get through doorways more easily.
I guess that's true.
You'd be able to squeeze into small spaces more easily. Not that any of us have to squeeze into a small space if we're not going up in a space capsule. But so if I had TJ's 6 foot 8 inch body and would feel protected in my arms.
I'm not quite 6'8". I'm like 6'6", but there we go.
Okay, 6'6". Still, I would have a whole different experience of life, because I tend to lose the women that I love because I'm just not big enough to make them feel protected.
That makes sense. Yeah, you definitely experience some other dimensions of big, because I don't know if you've ever been fat in your life, but you'd have to deal with that as well. So I'm sorry, you're fading out a little bit. What'd you say?
I've never...
Darn. Howard, are you with me?
Yep, I'm still here.
Oh, okay, I couldn't hear your response to that. I guess it kind of cut out a little bit.
Yeah. Well, no, basically I got techniques for that. I was a compulsive eater when I was 19 years old. And it was very hard to get out of that. And being preoccupied with food all day long is painful.
That's
really,
true.
Really painful.
I know that really sharply right now, because like I said, I'm on a diet. So.
Well, I worked out a diet for myself. I've been on it ever since, and it means I can control my weight whenever I want. If I want it to go up, I can get it to go up. If I want it to go down, I can get it to go down. So I would probably have a good time in your body slimming down.
Yeah, that's true. And then we could switch back, and then I'll be skinny, and you'll be a lush, so it'll be good. Abilius gave $20. This is for Howard. Just learned about the Great Attractor in a recent vid on space. Do you think it has a connection to how time is speeding up?
Well, what is it that indicates the time is speeding up? I don't know of such a thing. I mean, we are accelerating. The galaxies are flying away from each other at an ever-accelerating pace, and that's explained in the Big Bagel Theory, which is in that YouTube video that I just gave you. But time, one of the peculiar things about the Big Bagel Theory is if the Big Bang, if the matter, standard matter, comes out of the top side of the Big Bagel from the tiny hole in the center, and antimatter comes out of the bottom of the bagel from that tiny little hole at the center, then what direction does time go in the antimatter universe? Does it go forwards or does it go backwards? Is it time, normal time as we know it, or is it anti-time? And that's a question that, I came up with this theory at the age of 16, and now I'm 77. That's a long time, and I have never been able to solve that question.
So Transylvania Turf gave $10 and says, good money just to hear a guy I respect say Trump sucks to an audience of 900 plus. Stephen Fair gave $4.99, says, I vote no confidence in the system, therefore I'm casting a vote of confidence for Trump. How does that compute? Your argument sounds dishonest, Howard.
Well, look, when you destroy things, horrible things happen. You take a lot of things for granted, basics in your life, and allow you to be pro-Trump or anti-Trump. That includes being able to go down to the store and get food whenever you want it, being able to order take-in whenever you can afford it, having an apartment that safely shields you from rain, thunder, and most hurricanes. These are things you take for granted. Every single one of them is an artifact of what you could call a deep state, a human establishment. And if you take those things away, believe me, you will not live very long, and you will no longer have the luxury of being for or against Donald Trump.
Environmental Coffee House gave $4.99, says, Howard, can I interview you? I'm from Buffalo, New York.
My hometown.
My name is Sandy. We have a teeny climate change channel.
Yeah, she can interview me. Just get in touch with me at Howl Bloom, like wolves howling at the moon, howl, and bloom like the flowers that bloom in the spring. It's all one word, Howl Bloom, at AOL.com.
Howard just throwing his email out there. Small Mail gave $2 and says successor. He was correcting himself from earlier when we were wondering what he was meaning between predecessor or successor. But we figured it out, dude. Doom Kid gave $5 Australian and says, thank you for doing this interview, TJ. Love to hear Howard's views. Doom Kid's a pretty cool guy. I know him. Zavi.
Well, let me go back to successor for a second.
Oh, yeah. So go ahead.
Because I've been thinking out the problem of who's going to be Bernie Sanders' successor. There are very few people in the world, men or women, who are able to take complex issues and boil them down to 4 bullet points.
Right.
One of those people is Bernie Sanders. He is brilliant at it. The current Democratic Party platform, to the extent that we have a platform in the Democratic Party, comes from Bernie Sanders boiling things down to 4 or 5 basic points. Right. There is another brilliant boiler downer, and that is Elon Musk. He's able to take very complex issues that the people I know in the space community can argue endlessly, and he's able to boil them down to very simple goals reached by very simple means. That is a faculty, that brilliance at boiling things down, that is rare, really, really rare. And I do not see the next boiler and, how do I put this, communicator like Bernie Sanders and coming along anytime soon.
I have no idea. I know that a lot of people that are kind of in the lefty circles that I travel around in do not like Elon Musk at all, but I don't really know what their criticisms are. So I guess that
they're at that technology.
I guess they could put them forth if they wanted to. What's that, Paul? Howard?
But yeah, I'm here. So I didn't hear that last sentence.
Oh, I was just saying that that people can put forth whatever criticisms they might have of Elon if they want to, but I'm not really sure what the criticisms are. I just know that there's a lot of people that seem to be pretty down on him in the social circles I travel in. So Zavi No One gave $5. Says, TJ, do you have a favorite candy bar? It took me 30 years to realize I'm not really into candy. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really eat too many candy bars, and right now I'm not really trying to think about candy bars, but I guess a Milky Way is pretty fucking good.
I vote for Snickers.
There you go. Fallopium Films gave $5. It says, Howard, try to convince TJ to watch my film Tardy. It's Eric. Please, please, please.
Oh, Eric Nye. Okay, Eric Nye is my video editor.
Okay.
And his film is one of the strangest things you'll ever see in your life. It is totally gripping. I cannot remember its name, but look up Eric Nye.
Well, he says it's called Tardy, so I'm going to go ahead and write it down.
It's called Tardy, Tardy. So it's a film you should watch. It is weird.
Okay.
But as I say, it is gripping.
I am adding it to my things to look into document that I have, since so many people want to recommend so many things to me every minute of every day. Slagbit gave $5. It says, my question is more about the algorithm that social media uses to create echo chambers rather than social interactions. Thoughts on that? So he wants to revisit the social media issue, but he says it's more about the echo chambers that form on social media than anything else.
Well, the deal is that we all look for people who are like us. It's the birds of a feather principle.
Sure.
And once upon a time, if you take, get a bucket, put a lot of water in it, get a red sponge, get a yellow sponge. Mm-hmm. I mean real sponges, not sponges from the store that are made of polyurethane, the ones that creatures in the sea make. Because a sponge is a huge colony of cells. And run the red sponge through a sieve so it's all separated into its individual cell bucket. And run the yellow sponge through the sieve so it's all in the bucket. And what have you got? You've got red and yellow sponges mixed randomly together. Well, guess what they do? The red cells find the other red cells, and they gather together into another cohesive red sponge. And the yellow sponges all find their fellow yellow sponges and gather together into a cohesive knot of cells, a yellow sponge. So we do that all the time. We are different from our parents. We are very glad we are different from our parents sometimes. We try to find the people who have the same wacko points of view that we do. That validates us. That gives us a feeling that it's worthwhile being a human being. Mm-hmm. And in the process, we form social groups. And those social groups, each one of them has a different approach to the world. Mm-hmm. And those different approaches can come in handy sometimes in the group brain. For example, in Carthage, there was in the Senate of Carthage a peace party. It was a war party. And the peace party felt that the way to carry on life was to have a lot of commerce. And the Carthaginians were brilliant at commerce. They traded in their ships all the way from Iraq, God knows how many thousands of miles away, to Spain. And they even picked up goods from Britain in those days. And most of the time, the peace party, the party of commerce, was right. But every once in a while, the war party was right, because Rome became strong. And Rome was determined to wipe Carthage out utterly. And if the war party hadn't come to the fore, Carthage would have been in big trouble. In fact, Carthage was in big trouble. So you needed those countervailing things, scrapping with each other, mm-hmm. arguing with each other, debating with each other, and everywhere from the Senate to the streets, because each one represented, each of us are groups that when we gather together with people like us, we form a hypothesis in the group mind. And every once in a while, that hypothesis is going to be precisely the one that's needed to handle the difficulties of the time.
So I wanted to, we have a few questions that have come in for you here. Ugly Pyro gave $5. I think that now that we've opened up the floor to these questions, I don't think we're getting out. My plan was to get through them and then get back to just free form conversation, but it seems like we're just going to be using these as prompts. Right. Because now they're just coming in like crazy.
Well, they're helpful.
Yeah, they kind of, and they bring up some issues. Do you foresee, this is from Ugly Pyro, who gave $5 and says, do you foresee the current scientific community holding on to the idea for dark matter / energy and potentially in the process hamper our efforts to progress in science due to so many influential cosmologists investing so much of the IR time and energy into it.
Right.
I don't know what he means by IR.
Right.
IR time, but
he's absolutely right. Though there is a heavy investment in the current way of looking at things.
Sure.
In the standard model, as it's called. And any new model that comes along is going to have to fight very hard. The people behind it are going to have to fight very hard to get recognition for it. The guy who came up with plate tectonics was a highly honored scientist. But when he came up with the idea of plate tectonics, everybody thought he was nuts. It took 2 generations after he first proposed the idea for the idea to catch on, and now it's the new standard model in geology.
Right.
So that's the way science works. Now, once upon a time, I went to a guide. There was something called group selection. It means that not just individuals compete, but groups compete. And that group competition is very important in the evolution of a species. And it was considered totally verboten, forbidden in science. You could get, if you wrote an article supporting group selection, you could be frozen out of respectable academic journals for the rest of your life, and you could be thrown out of tenure track in your university, which was death to your career. And I told the leading guy in the field that I would turn that around in a year, and I did. But that's the exception to the rule. The general rule is your idea, if it's an outside the box idea, for your idea to be accepted takes 20 years for the old generation committed to the old idea to die out.
Yeah. And, you never know. They might live longer than that. Controde gave $5 as for Howard. I don't know whether or not I'm an anti-Zionist, but I think Israel should not exist anymore. The country is not needed now that World War II is over, and there is currently more acceptance of Jews in the European countries that used to persecute them.
Now, the anti-Semitism in the European community is huge. Islam is inherently anti-Semitic. You can read lots of quotes like in the Hadith, the day of judgment shall not come.
Do you think that let
me just finish the quote.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Until every tree and stone stands up and says there is a Jew behind me, kill him. Right. So, and the number of Muslims in the European community is growing, and their influence is growing constantly. Europe is not really safe for Jews right now. The United States still is safe for Jews. God knows how long that will last, because the left, my side of things, the Democratic side of things, has become inherently anti-Semitic. And nobody has a country. Let's say the French no longer need France. Why? Because French people are accepted everywhere. The British no longer need Britain. Why? Because British people are accepted everywhere. That's bullshit. We have been the indigenous people of that territory for 3,200 years, period. There were imperialistic invaders that came along. They were called the Muslims. And in 638 AD, they came into Jerusalem, wiped out 40 Jewish cities. Fuck them. I'm sorry. Fuck them. I don't accept that. And then they had the audacity to take the one temple that was holy to the Jews and build a mosque on it. Fuck them all over again. You don't shit on other people's holy stuff and call your shit holy. So get the fuck out of my country. And my country, Israel, though my country is the United States, I'm a very chauvinistic American. But my other country, Israel, Judea and Samaria, these what are called the West Bank, the territories, they are traditionally Jewish. That's the territory of the Jews in the Bible. Get the fuck out of my territory. Now, I don't really mean get the fuck out of my territory, because there are Arabs who live in Israel. There are like 900,000 of them, and they are the freest, wealthiest Arabs in the Middle East who don't have oil money, normal citizens. They live a quality of life that goes beyond anything you'll see in Egypt or Libya or Saudi Arabia, with the exception of the people who have a ton of money in Saudi Arabia. So I don't really mean get them out of there, but it's not their country. It isn't. It's the country of the Jews. It has been for 3,200 years. The record of it is in a book called the Bible. And the Bible, I don't believe, is accurate about most things, but it's territorially accurate. In anthropology, it's great evidence.
Yeah,
in archaeology.
I'm not super well versed in like foreign policy matters, and I certainly don't really know much about the internal politics of Israel. But My understanding is that it's kind of an apartheid state where like the Muslims are like an underclass that are like suppressed by the mainstream like culture there, like the Jewish culture. Like
Well,
aren't there certain rights that are like just like denied to like the Muslim citizens in the country?
No, when I was there in 1961, the Jewish state was giving scholarships and fellowships to Muslim kids to go through undergraduate school and graduate school. There was a movement, a protest movement against what was called the military government over certain Arab towns. And I don't know much about that. But frankly, they were freer. The Muslims were freer than they were in Jordan,
right,
just across the Jordan River.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't know though. I mean, like freer, but are they as free as the Jewish citizens? Is like the real question to me. Like, I don't really care whether they're freer than the people in Jordan, because Jordan's its own country with its own
they're
issues,
not as
right?
free as the Jewish citizens, but Jewish citizens are so unfree in Saudi Arabia and Jordan and Lebanon that they were tossed out in 1948, and 800,000 of them were tossed out.
I'd be just
and had to go to Israel.
Yeah,
they're not free at all.
I'm just as much against. I'm against that too. I mean, that doesn't sound too great either. I'm not really a big fan.
Well, those are apartheid states, and actually, Mohammed himself set up Saudi Arabia as an apartheid state. He said no people of other religions should live here.
Right.
So Islam has apartheid built into it. And if you want to attack an imperialist enterprise, Islam, within 100 years of the death of Muhammad, took territory 11 times the size of the conquest of Alexander the Great, 5 times the size of the Roman Empire, and 7 times the size of the United States. And nobody is complaining about it. Do you see any anti-imperialist marches against the fact that Islam still controls territories like Malaysia, Indonesia, Algeria, territories that are by no means Arab? And that means that an Arab overclass has been ruling in these territories.
Yeah, I'm not. Hold on, I'm not denying though that I'm not denying that a Jew in Saudi Arabia probably has it worse than an Arab in Israel, but I kind of think it's. I kind of think it's like besides the point though. I mean, like it's kind of like whataboutism, right?
Well, no, because if you're going to look at this rationally, you have to look at the full picture.
Okay.
You just can't isolate one tiny state that's a sixth the size of New Jersey.
Right.
When, in fact, the Arabs alone, not just all the Muslims, the Arabs alone have a territory 3 times the size of the United States. Now, if the Jews could move back into Israel and could take deserts and make them bloom, and could take malarial swamps and make them into rich farmlands, then surely that can be done with a territory 3 times the United States that's in the hands of our closest genetic relatives, the Arabs. And I always thought Zionism, when I was a little kid, was about taking all of these things we'd learned about how to make deserts bloom and teaching it to the Arabs so they can make their desert bloom, because our desert, as I said, is a sixth the size of New Jersey, and theirs is 3 times the size of the United States. Think of all the potential wealth that they would create for their people.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not really super great on the geopolitics stuff, but I definitely would like to see someone who is maybe a little bit more well-versed in that, and you have some sort of debate on that topic. Maybe I could moderate it.
But that would be interesting, because remember, I've written the Muhammad Code.
Yeah, I mean, I know you've written books about this, and I definitely know some people who have like better geopolitical knowledge than I do, so I definitely would like to put you guys on a collision course at some point. But we have a lot more donations to go through, and nothing is more important than me making my money. So, so we can hash out. We'll figure out the Israel-Palestine thing on a future episode. Freakadelic gave $3 and says, Bloom, pardon if this has been asked already, but your thoughts on the far off aim of workers owning the means of production and just anarcho-socialism in general?
Well, first of all, without leaders, the society doesn't exist. And so you try to create an egalitarian world, and it comes out very badly. So when they tried this in the Soviet Union, and they really, really tried hard, it turned out that, the workers didn't own the means of production. A bunch of guys who claimed they were speaking on behalf of the workers owned the means of production. Right. It was called the nomenklatura. And the nomenklatura, the members of the Communist Party, who were way up in the party lived a very rich lifestyle in the Soviet Union, while everybody else stood in lines for 5 hours to buy bread. It didn't work. And capitalism is organic. Capitalism evolves on its own within certain limits created by the government. And capital, what is a capitalist there for? To try to find something that appeals to you so greatly that you will go to a store and spend your money on it. That means the capitalist is there to please you, no matter how he perceives it, or even if he perceives he's greedy as hell and doesn't think he's thinking about you at all. To be greedy, he has to create something that you want, that you delight in, or that just sustains you on a daily basis and you can count on, the way you can count on your Pringles potato chips or your Lay's potato chips or whatever it is that you happen to munch while you're watching television, not to mention the fact that you can count on the programming on television. That's all comes from capitalists trying to please you to the nth degree. So who does that put in the power seat? You. For all practical means, for all practical purposes, you own the means of production. Why? Because they're trying to do what a dog tries to do. They are trying to please you. And that's not the way it works in a socialist system. In a socialist system where you allegedly own the means of production, you stand in line for 5 hours to get bread. That's not a great way to live a life.
Yeah, but I also don't think it's super great way to live a life to be like a minimum wage worker at like Walmart or Target or a place like that where the CEO is getting super rich. I don't really feel like you can make the claim that like the minimum wage or slightly above minimum wage cashier working at Target like owns meaningfully the means of production just because they're able to be a consumer and probably give a lot of that money back to Target.
Here. CEOs in Japan, when it looked like Japan was about to overtake the United States in 5 years, CEOs in Japan earned 12 times what the average worker earns.
Right.
CEOs in the United States today earn 512 times what the average worker earns. So it's obviously not necessary to overpay these CEOs to that degree. 12 times would be just fine. There are a lot of corrections.
I think that there would probably, I think there would probably be a lot less antipathy towards capitalism if the CEO was only making 12 times what the average worker made. But I don't know for sure. But man, it really sucks.
I just want to plug something. I have a book that was originally called Reinventing Capitalism, Putting Soul in the Machine. It's now called The Genius of the Beast, The Radical Revision of Capitalism. And it is about putting soul in the machine.
So I have, I'm going to put this up on the screen so people can see it here. This is Genius of the Beast, a radical revision of capitalism, which is one of Howard's books. There's not a link to it down below because I didn't know we were going to be covering it, but
that's it.
The kind of the pitfall of using these audience questions is there's so many things that I think could be like topics unto an entire show themselves, but instead we kind of have to do these rough kind of like sketches of them. But yeah, you could definitely read that book. So T-Money gave 666, says, wondering if Howard knows about Vosh. Keep up the good work, TJ. I doubt Howard knows about Vosh, but do you know about Vosh?
What is Vosh?
Vosh is a YouTuber of a pretty leftist bent who is a big proponent of like worker-owned co-ops and market-based socialism. That I think you could probably have an interesting conversation with him at some point.
Well, sounds interesting. Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, he'll talk to almost anybody. So you know, I mean, he definitely talked to you. He's talked to me. He's talked to others. Let's see. So we have a few more questions that have come in the meantime here. I don't know exactly where we left off. So Stephen Fair, who is the guy who kept asking you about how a vote of no confidence or a non-vote is a vote for Trump, gave $2 and says, thanks for the word salad, Howard. So apparently not very satisfied with your answer. So let me take a crack at it. So Stephen Fair, I think that what is being said here is that, you know, the idea that of a viable third party, I can understand why that's very appealing, especially when you're faced with two unappealing choices like Trump and Biden. But at the end of the day, you need to recognize that one of those two is going to be president. And if you're not taking direct action to see that it's Biden, then it's going to be Trump. Because Trump has a built-in base. Like, if you ask people on the Democratic side whether they're voting for Biden or against Trump, they let you know they're voting against Trump more than they're voting for Biden. And the opposite is true on the Trump side. So Trump has the default support. Trump has the built-in base. The Biden votes are really anti-Trump votes. So if you want to be anti-Trump, Biden's the way to go. That's just how it is. That's how it breaks down. You don't have to be happy with that state of affairs. I'm certainly not, but I think that's what's basically going on. And I think that unless you're going to vote for Biden, you're basically by default voting for Trump. Transylvania Turf gave $10, says Beau of the Fifth Column, great channel, and a guy that knows how to break it down. Highly recommended. I guess he's giving us a channel recommendation. So I'm going to go ahead and add Beau of the Fifth Column to my document of recommended things, because people are, as I say, always recommending stuff to me. Where is my document? Hold on. Here it is. Okay. It's been added. So, sir, at some point I will actually check out all these recommendations. I might have to set aside a day for it. Xavi, no one gave $5. It says, I've noticed most don't realize a Three Musketeers is a Milky Way without caramel. I just want to give you money. Loving the interview. Thank you. John Holder has a question for Howard. He gave $3.99. Says, Howard, how can we watch your new documentary? Good question. We already answered that at the beginning, but his new documentary, The Grand Unified Theory of Howard Bloom, will be available on the 21st. There is a link right down below in the description that'll tell you exactly how to purchase that documentary when indeed it is available for your consumption. You can also check out Howard's new book, which is, Howard, what's the title again?
It's the Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me, Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll.
Right.
Do that again. I stumbled on the beginning. Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me, A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll.
Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me, A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll. Released on April 15th, 2020. It's out, getting good reviews, and talking about Howard Bloom's very interesting time as one of the greatest press agents in rock and roll history, if not the best. Scream It Yeah gave $10 and says Elon Musk smoked weed on Joe Rogan's show and decided to fire an employee for smoking weed. That employee wanted to unionize. Murder is wrong. I don't know what the murder is wrong thing at the end was, but I guess that
let me tell you about Elon Musk.
I guess he's saying that Elon Musk is a hypocrite for wanting to fire an employee, or say, I guess, all right, so the line of logic here, just to make sure we're clear, is Elon Musk smoked weed on Joe Rogan. He fired an employee for smoking weed, but the real reason he fired the employee was because the employee tried to unionize. So there's a criticism of Elon Musk, and you seem to be a big Elon Musk fan, so I'll let you handle that. I am going to step away for just one moment because nature calls, but I will be back in just a jiffy. So, but you can give your Elon Musk answer while I'm.
Okay, well, I don't know. Yes, let me give the Elon Musk answer. You go take care of what you need to take care of. Relax. Okay, so the Elon Musk situation is 2005. I've been dragged screaming and kicking to a press conference, the first press conference I've ever gone to in my life. People from the National Science Foundation, NASA, and the National Space Society were absolutely intent on getting me there and gave me all kinds of wonderful babysitters while I was there who took really good care of me and introduced me to everybody of importance. Elon Musk gave a presentation, and Elon Musk said, when I got out of college, I asked what three things would change humanity the most in my lifetime. And my answers were the internet, alternative energy, and space. So I went into the first on the list, the internet, and I helped build PayPal. And I sold it, and I made close to, what was it? Close to $1 billion or something like that, $800 million. Then he said, I skipped over item number 2, and I went to item number 3, which was space. And I worked on getting us into space. Well, Elon Musk had never launched a thing in those days. And the folks at NASA were saying he never would launch a thing, that launching things was much too difficult for a person like Elon Musk to ever succeed in. But Elon stuck to it anyway. Now, here's the strange thing. I used to be in the entertainment business, and every once in a while I would have a vision. And for example, there was a band, it had a #3 single. It was a band that prided itself on the democracy of its members. Every member was equal to every other member. I knew that the band's manager was about to come into New York. He was Diana Ross's husband. I went out to the airport in a limo to pick him up because I knew we'd be baked in traffic, rush hour traffic, coming back to Manhattan, and that I could propagandize him for all I was worth. And I said, look, I know your band prides itself on its democracy. Every member is equal to every other member. But if you let me take the lead singer and pull her out in front and put all the attention on her, I guarantee you I will deliver you a star. And that singer's name was Shaka Khan. He covered my ass, fortunately. Again, when a manager came into my office because his artist, his client, had been turned down by 23 record companies, which is just about every record company that existed in the United States of America. I sat him down and said, Kenny, if you do what I tell you to, if you work the way I work, 7 days a week, 17 hours a day, I guarantee you we will have a star in 2 years. A star with somebody who's been turned down by every single record company that exists in North America? You got to be kidding. It was true. I don't know how. I've only had visions of that kind a tiny number of times in my lifetime. And when I saw Elon Musk, I knew I was looking at a myth in the making. I knew that I was looking at somebody who kids 110 years from now would be following, role model, the way kids followed the role model of Henry Ford once upon a time.
The man, the myth, the legend, the Musk.
Yeah. So there is something profoundly special about Elon Musk. And it will never be captured in any of the articles that you read about him, but it sets the alarm bell in my gut that goes off on those rare occasions when I meet a superstar and know it. It set that alarm off like crazy.
Well, he does seem to be a polarizing figure. I'll give him that. So Tucker White, 94, gave $2 and left a string of absolute gibberish that has no discernible meaning whatsoever. Thank you for that. Lord J. Darkey gave $2 and says, by the way, I don't know how much longer you can stick with us, Howard. We've been going about an hour and a half at this point, but if you need,
well, I'm here as good as you're, as long as you're good.
As long as you, I'm willing to go. But if it starts to get to the point where you need to go, we can initiate like a lightning round. But as long as you're good to go, I'm good to go. I can go for as long as whatever. So this is Lord J. Darkey gave $2. Is Howard a fan? Is Howard in favor of giving America back to the native people? Because that sounds pretty close to the argument he's making on Israel. Also, I'd like to see Howard debate either Galen or Vosh on this topic.
I'm not in favor of giving America back to the Indians because I'm selfish. I like North America. I like the United States the way it is. Okay. I like its ideals.
Right.
I dislike the fact that its ideals are being trashed and may never come back to the surface alive if we have a second term of the current president. But I see your logic. It's used all the time.
Right. So basically, but do you think there's actually like a material intellectual difference, or is it just a matter of like, well, no, it's just a matter of like self-interest at that point?
It's a matter of, I don't know what, personal conviction grows with you from the time you're a child.
Gotcha.
Look, if we gave all of North America back to the Native Americans, we could kiss America goodbye. I'm not willing to kiss this great experiment in democracy and equality aside. It's as what's his name used to say, Barack Obama, that it says in the Constitution that the purpose of all of this is to perfect these ideals. And we are only halfway on the path of perfection, if that. And I would like to see it in a half survive and thrive.
Okay. Atlas gave $6.66 and says, Howard, what are your thoughts on nuclear? Is it worth the risk, so to speak, or should we be focusing on less lucrative but more stable forms of green energy? Also, are you hopeful for nuclear fusion? Will we have it in the next decade?
Okay, the deal is that I've been out there promoting harvesting solar power in space and down to Earth. And if we harvested solar power in space and sent it down to Earth, first of all, terrestrial solar has a couple of problems, little weather anomalies. One is called clouds, the other is called night. Mm-hmm. Both of those wipe out your ability to collect solar power on Earth. Solar power in space is 24/7. It's constant. And that's called base load power because that is the power that our current grid system uses. If we use solar power in space, if we harvested it and send it down to Earth with harmless microwaves like the ones that are used in your cell phone, we could eliminate man-made greenhouse gases completely. Completely. We could end fossil fuels for energy generation completely. And according to my partner in this for 4 years, the 11th president of India, Dr. APJ Kalam, who was a superstar, a political superstar in India, we could lift 2 billion people out of poverty. So space solar power is the Green New Deal. And that's what I would like to see. Nuclear can be very useful. Fusion, we have no idea. We've been pursuing fusion since I was a little boy, which is a long time ago. That's the last 60 years. And it's always been just 10 years down the road. Well, the 10 years has been up over and over and over again 6 times, and we still don't have fusion.
So you're a little skeptical at this point.
But standard nuclear, it's great. But space solar power doesn't produce rods that you can't find a location for that would poison human beings and other animals.
So Nihilist the God gave $5 and says, "Don't do that to poor Howard. Vosh would destroy him in a debate with facts and logic. Anyway, subscribe to Nihilist the God on YouTube." Okay, he's trying to promote himself at this point. Yeah, Nihilist the God. Great. Let's see. Where we are here. Blah, 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 blah. All right, so the oldie gave $10 Australian and says, "Elon represents exciting possibilities for capitalist structure that's going to draw almost more hate/confusion than the reps of the dark side of capitalism." I don't know exactly what that's supposed to mean, but thank you for your contribution. Secular atheism.
Well, let me tell you something.
Yes.
Well, let me tell you an observation that is very germane to what he just said. We have new businesses that come along and solve problems in very big ways and change things dramatically. And the first generation that's exposed to these dramatic changes loves them. The second generation takes them for granted and hates them. The third generation wants to tear them apart because it takes for granted that the gifts this technology or whatever it is, this company gives will live forever, even if they tear it down. No, you tear a structure apart that gives you something crucial in your life, and that something crucial is gone. It's no longer available. An example, the first time I saw this was with McDonald's. When I was a kid, hamburgers were $1.65, which is a huge amount back then. It's the equivalent of $12 or something like that now. And no kid I knew, including myself, could use his allowance to buy a hamburger. That was simply impossible. And then this new chain came along that was offering hamburgers for 5 cents. Can you believe that? Any kid could afford 5 cents. It changed the nature of what we kids could eat, period. We had never had access to hamburgers before, and now we did. Well, by the second and third generation, McDonald's was taken for granted as a massive, giant corporate thing gobbling up America and poisoning Americans' kids, and everybody forgot the option that McDonald's put into our lives and has sustained in our lives because Burger King came along and Wendy's came along to compete with it. So people become very ungenerous to the institutions that sustain them and fail to realize what they are getting out of those institutions and think that if they tear those institutions apart, somehow the world would become better. Well, somehows don't happen. Chaos is filled by murderous thugs like Lenin and Stalin. And we don't want to open ourselves to chaos because we don't want a world ruled by murderous thugs.
I don't know. I feel like plenty of times in history when we've opened the door, we've flung open the shutter and allowed chaos to reign. It's shaken.
And then we've gotten Mao Zedong.
Sometimes it's like a roll of the dice though, because like sometimes you get that, and sometimes you get like the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It's like kind of a crapshoot. I feel like chaos can be preceded by a new and better order. It could also be preceded by a new and worse order. But
right.
I think at some point people just get sick of the status quo and are just ready to press the button. And I think a lot of people are there.
People were sick of the status quo in 1914 or 1915 when the First World War got started and interrupted everything. And they were looking forward to a revolution that would bring a paradise. And in 1917, because of the pressures of war, the German government decided to take Russia out of the alliance, the Western Alliance, because they'd been part of the Western Alliance, and they bankrolled Stalin to throw a revolution and take over the country. And no, they bankrolled Lenin. Sorry.
Yeah.
And Lenin did, and it did not make things better. Something like 100 million Russians died as a result of the Russian Revolution.
Right.
But the revolution in 1917, when it happened, everybody in the West who was revolutionarily inclined thought, "Oh wow, this is going to happen in the West too." That World War I is seeding such chaos. We too will have a revolution that will bring a paradise. Well, yes, a paradise was around the corner, but it wasn't the revolutionary socialist paradise that intellectuals were imagining. It was the paradise called the Roaring Twenties, with jazz, with flappers, and with these new things called automobiles. In other words, it was a capitalist paradise of all this that turned out to be right around the corner. So surprising things come out of chaos.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the point, though, is like you never know. You never know what you're going to get. It might be your utopia, it might be mine, or it might be something we both hate. You just never know. Secular Atheism Foundation gave $5 and says, a capitalist infrastructure within a socialist society. Thoughts?
Well, the book, The Genius of the Beast, The Radical Revision of Capitalism, says the Western system has delivered things unlike any civilization has ever known. If you'd been born in 1850, your life expectancy would have been 38.5 years. If you'd been born in 2000 in the Western system, in the Western world, your life expectancy would have been 78.5 years, more than double what it was in 1850, 40 years longer than it was in 1850. If you took a Stanford Binet IQ test from 1916, the first year it was administered, and you gave it to 100 kids off the street today who've allegedly been dumbed down and shallowed by Facebook and Twitter, those kids would register as marginal geniuses. They'd register as having an average IQ of 135. If you took the poorest paid worker in England in 2000, in London, and you compared her to the poorest paid worker in 1850 in London, your personal assistant would have earned what an entire tenement full of Irish stock workers had earned back in 1850. An entire tenement full. And that's not counting the fact that she had access to things that even Prince Albert, who was a techno freak to the nth degree, Queen Victoria's husband, that even he couldn't have had access to with all his money and power. Cell phones, she could have had access to, and antibiotics that Prince Albert couldn't have had access to. In fact, Prince Albert died at the age of 41 of a stomach problem, which could have probably been solved by a simple antibiotic. He could have had an extra 40 years of life if he had been alive in 2000 instead of being alive in 1850. And the clincher is that if you lived in 1650, the pre-industrial times in the Western society, or if you lived in one of those indigenous societies that lives at peace with its neighbors and in harmony with nature, your odds of dying a violent death at the hands of one of your fellow human beings would have been 10 times what they are today. In other words, peace has gone up by a factor of 10 due to the Western system, whatever the fuck the Western system is. And the book, The Genius of the Beast, says the Western system is a balancing act between three elements in dynamic tension with each other. One is government, which gave us
element number one.
The second one is private industry. The third is the protest industry. Protest industry has been around ever since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution around 1770. It started as an anti-slavery movement. In 1848, Henry David Thoreau invented peaceful resistance, whatever it's called, but a peaceful approach to demonstrating against the government. And we started peace movements in 1848. In 1899, an anti-imperialism movement that became a worldwide movement thanks to the technologies of steamships, so people could get together in international conferences for the first time. And so the Western system has these three elements. They're all battling each other all the time. And yet out of their battle with each other comes these astonishments, what my book, The Genius of the Beast, calls material miracles and secular salvation. And these are things we're giving it to each other within that system all the time. And one of the reasons the system works is because the protest industry is a corrective mechanism that is constantly inching the entire system higher. Government provides goods that private industry can't, like the roadway system that was built under Eisenhower in the 1950s, like the infrastructure we need badly today, but we don't have, but all the bridges that we use right now and tunnels. And not to mention, the government gave us DARPA, and DARPA in the late 1960s and 1970s gave us something called the internet. This entire new piece of real estate in which you and I spend a good part of our lives didn't exist in 1970, but the government gave it to us. They also gave us the microchips that make the laptop I'm using and the personal computer you're using possible.
Right. But I mean, like, you could go back to, you know, like, you go back to like the Industrial Revolution days and say, yeah, I mean, things are bad and there's child labor in the factories and stuff, but at least we're not serfs anymore. And you can go back to the serfdom days.
That was true.
You can go back to the serfdom days and be like, well, you know, yeah, we're serfs and we have to till the land for the king, but at least we're not hunter-gathering tribes. And like, just because it's an improvement on what's been done before doesn't mean that it's necessarily the end of the line or the end-all be-all.
Oh, it's not the end of the line. It's the whole purpose of protest movement.
Right.
That's the whole reason I'm involved with the space community.
But
today. That's the whole reason that when Buzz Aldrin tried to get me to found a group in 2005, I founded the Space Development Committee. Believe me, we are looking forward.
I just don't know that. I just don't know that capitalism is the answer anymore. But you know, I mean, I guess you make a pretty compelling case in your book, which I did read a number of years ago. Emperor Swagatine gave $6.99 Canadian and says, Howard, do you think the U.S. This is basically the same argument about the Native Americans ceding the land of the Native Americans, which you've already addressed. Neckbeard level 5,000 gave $10 and says, we can't move forward looking back, Howard. Let them have their temple with respect. I think your position is misguided. Love ya, TJ. I think they're talking about the Muslim temple in Jerusalem or whatever. Right.
The Golden Dome.
Right. So which
to me, you know, that's not just absurd. It's obscene that you would do that to them. I mean, look, when the Spanish moved into Central America,
sure,
and they saw the major holy sites of the Incas and the Aztecs, you know what they did? They raised those temples and they built their own fucking churches on them. That's obscene.
Sure.
In the West, we have enough of a protest industry to realize that is obscene. Well, it's just as obscene for the Muslim imperialist movement, which has been around now for 1,400 years. It's just as obscene for them to squat on my holiest temple. Look, I'm an atheist. And yet that has a cultural meaning to me.
So
do I want to see the churches moved? Hey, if you could move them and rebuild the Aztec temples and the Inca temples, and they matter anybody to anybody anymore, unfortunately they don't.
Yeah, because we kill everyone that matter to by now. Project Mathesar gave $5, and this kind of builds on to what you were saying a minute ago. He says, Howard, the problem is you're making an argument for Israel from a religious perspective to an audience of atheists. Your defense falls on deaf ears.
That can't be. I'm an atheist.
Right. So the oldie gave $5 in Australian money and says, Elon, hero of capitalism, that will draw more hate than its villains. Oh, I see. I see what he's saying.
Why? Why will Elon become a villain? I know he's being villainized these days, and I find it appalling. The same way I found the villainization of McDonald's, which was a savior in my youth, appalling. You don't destroy things that are giving things to you, and Elon is the only visionary we have in America who's setting out something that can equal or surpass the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative.
Mickey Bink and the Ski Bees gave $3.33 and says, curious as to what you think about John Lear's website, thelivingmoon.com and his theories of bases on the moon landing being impossible because of radiation from the Van Allen belt, and 9/11 being pulled off using direct energy weapons. I'm pretty sure that both
sounds highly unlikely.
Yeah, I think me and Howard both discount that pretty strongly, but maybe I'm wrong.
I have a friend, I've had a friend for 15 years who has spent time walking around on the moon. He says the moon is not a fit place for human beings, but he's been there, and that's Buzz Aldrin.
Right. So you'd have to.
As for 9/11, watching on my rooftop as the thing happened, and I didn't see anything that could be interpreted as an energy weapon.
Yeah. I think it's pretty silly. It sounds very conspiratorial and pretty dubious and unlikely. So somehow or some way, we've actually reached the end of these donations. At least for now. I mean, more could always come in, but I guess in the meantime, maybe you could tell me a little bit about what your book is about. Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me. Let me go ahead and plop it up on the screen here for a second so we can kind of like elucidate about it as we talk about it, and then we can go back and read the whatever few donations have come in. Well, hopefully it won't be few. Hopefully people will contribute, and then we can wrap this up. So, yeah, let's have a little discussion about what this book is about. I find it interesting. You know, you are an atheist. You do use a lot of religious language, like you talk about the soul. And, you know, obviously you do have a certain cultural affinity for your, you know, religious ancestry, I guess, of Jews. So what is this book about? Is this about like your sort of secular spirituality kind of thing, or what's the deal here?
It's all of those things. I mean, it's about my experiences with Michael Jackson, who's the most important, astonishing, staggering person I have ever met in my life. Sets a whole new standard for qualities of awe, wonder, surprise, and absolute commitment to his kids, to his audience. Prince, Bob Marley, Bette Midler, John Mellencamp, Billy Idol, Joan Jett, people like that. But it's not just a series of random stories. It's about a search for the gods inside. And what do I mean by the gods inside? When I was 10 years old, a book appeared in my lap, in my family's living room. When I say appeared, I mean, you know the location of every single book your parents own, because they all stay in the same places on the shelves. They were there when you first gained consciousness. They're still there when you're a teenager. And this book it was not a book that had ever been on my parents' shelves. I had no idea where it came from and where it went. And it said the first two rules of science are these: the truth at any price, including the price of your life. And it gave the example of Galileo. And it said that he was willing to go to the stake to defend his truth. It would take me 30 years to discover that was wrong, but I needed the heroic example of courage. And the second rule of science: look at things right under your nose as if you've never seen them before, and then proceed from there. Look for things that you and everybody around you take for granted and are thus invisible to you, and flush them out into visibility, and then proceed from there. And it gave the example of Anton von Leeuwenhoek, who invented the microscope. And so flash forward 2.5, 3 years later, I suddenly realize I'm an atheist. My bar mitzvah is coming up.
Yeah.
I have the kids in Buffalo, New York hate me. My parents are not fond of me. And this is the first party that's ever going to be thrown in Buffalo that I will be invited to. Plus, there will be presents. So I shovel aside the idea that I'm an atheist and keep it out of the main room of my mind so that I can legitimately go through my bar mitzvah. And it takes me 2 months to write thank you notes for all the presents. And at the end of August, when I finish, I'm able to confess to myself I'm an atheist. Well, guess what happens in the Jewish calendar right after the end of August? The Jewish high holidays. So my parents, for the Jewish high holidays, managed to get me into a suit, which is nigh unto impossible because I hate suits. And they managed to get me into their blue four-door Fraser automobile. And they get me all the way to Richmond Avenue, which is where the synagogue is. And I don't want to go any further. So my parents, I'm holding onto the car door frame while my parents are tugging at my ankles, willing to drag their firstborn son up the street like a sack of meat to the temple. And I have a sudden realization. Galileo had his insights because he took an instrument that was designed for horizontal viewing. It was a tube with lenses at both ends, and it was designed to allow the Dutch to see their enemies, the Spanish, coming over the horizon long before the Spanish can realize that the Dutch are onto them. Mm-hmm. Galileo takes this horizontal instrument and has the audacity to turn it up at the skies. Now, what's wrong with that? That's God's underwear. You don't look under God's underwear. Plus, everybody knows exactly what's up there. Aristotle says the perfect form is the circle. God is perfection. So everything up there is perfect spheres and perfect circles. What's to look at? And he looks up there anyway, and what does he see? Stones. Balls of stone in the sky. And it changes humanity's relationship to the cosmos, totally. Anton von Leeuwenhoek takes an instrument designed for horizontal viewing. He's a draper. He's importing fabrics to Holland. And he uses a magnifying glass in order to see how fine the weave of the fabrics is. And he has the audacity to turn it down and look at pond water. And he discovers an entire world that has coexisted with humans ever since humans evolved that we never knew existed. Mm-hmm. Microbial world. So here I am holding onto the door frame, and I'm an atheist, so I know there are no gods in the sky and no gods under the earth, but there are gods in this picture. Where? My parents' passionate intensity about getting me off that door frame and up to that fucking temple. So if there are gods inside my parents, then there have got to be gods inside of me. So one of my scientific tasks becomes to find those gods inside of us and to experience them, to experience the kinds of ecstasies that some people use in order to get to the gods, to experience the kind of ecstatic rituals that are radically different from anything I'm going to experience at my temple. And this book is about looking for the gods inside in Michael Jackson, in Prince, in Bob Marley, in Bette Midler, and finding them. Absolutely finding them. So these are stories of the major personalities of the 1970s and 1980s in the music world that you will never read anyplace else, because nobody else. I was a science person. I was not a music junkie when I got into this business. I had a radically different perspective, and I developed something I called secular shamanism, which is about finding the very souls, the gods inside of each of my artists, and introducing the hello, are you fine, thank you very much self to that inner self that comes alive when you're on stage and you're in front of an audience and you feel the pupils of the audience dilating, you feel their eyes widening, you see their faces melting, you see them come together in one giant amoebic blob of energy, you feel that amoeba reach a pseudopod out to you, you feel the energy of those 700 or 70,000 people flowing through you, you feel it going up to your head, you have an out-of-body experience, you watch this whole thing from the ceiling, and you see that something in your head transmogrify all of this energy from the audience, turn it into something weirdly different, and send it channeling back out to that audience again, and you see their eyes open wider, and it's a continuous feedback loop, and it's precisely the ecstasy of the rituals of the gods inside that I was looking for. So my job, if you were my client, was to find those gods inside you that dance you like a marionette on stage, and to introduce you to them so you could stay true to them for the rest of your lives, because it just turns out that when you find the gods inside of you, you give the gods inside of another 100 million people permission to exist, and you create a validation for an entire subculture that didn't exist before you began stepping out on that stage.
Cool. So that book is available down below. Links down below. There's also a link to the documentary that was recently made about Howard Bloom called The Grand Unifying Theory of Howard Bloom. Both those links are available right down there in the description section of this video. So if you feel like checking that book out, it sounds like it'd be especially good for anybody who has like aspirations of being a performer, or who's just interested in I guess religious experience, not so much religion itself, but the experience of that sort of like ecstatic state that obviously human beings are capable of reaching.
Anybody interested in finding his or her real self. not
Yeah.
the little 5% of the brain that's your rational verbal self.
Take off the mask.
The 95% of you that's below the floorboards of yourself.
Yeah, see what's fucking kicking around in the dark corners of your psyche. All right, so we got a few more donations that have come in since we started talk about that. So let's go ahead and read those and wrap this on up. So we have Rick McGee gave £5 and says, I think the problem of zealot Trump supporters, passive or dedicated, will continue to plague worldwide political discussion long after Trump is yeeted, which I think means gone. But I'm not down with all the lingo these days. So yeah, does the end of the Trump presidency signal the end of the impact of the Trump supporter? I don't think it does, but we'll see what Howard thinks.
Well, it may signal the end of the unity of a bunch of subcultures that have found a common interest through Trump. The evangelical subculture, for example, which somehow puts up with the violently anti-Christ-like behavior of Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump breaks every principle of the Sermon on the Mount every single day when he takes to a microphone. So the evangelicals, the people who just feel that they're hardworking Americans and other people trying to get ahead of them in line unfairly, and all the others that Trump has managed to unite, they may fall apart. But the evangelicals have been working at fusing themselves with the folks who've become adherents to Donald Trump for a very long time, since at least the 1980s. So it's unlikely the coalition that they put together long before Donald Trump showed up on the scene will fall. I mean, they have people by the gonads, literally, almost literally, because they've made abortion their one defining issue. And that, because it's a sexual issue, has tremendous cohesive power for their group. So, but hopefully the Trump way of lying about everything all the time, and in the process killing large numbers of American people by making them susceptible to whatever crisis like COVID happens to come along. Let's imagine we had a foreign threat from China. This man has shown himself absolutely incapable of dealing with unusual situations. So we are not in the right hands right now for any kind of abnormal situation.
All right.
So hopefully that would be gone. And there's a value to the subculture that I disagree with, the Trumpian subculture.
Is the value just like from a standpoint of different ideas clashing against one another, or do you feel like there's a separate value?
I can't see the separate value, frankly. I don't think that homeschooling, so that you can get kids religious and having religious schools and all the things, and
do you think it's a form of
against abortion?
Do you think it's a form of child abuse to indoctrinate children into certain religious beliefs?
Well, that would make the raising of every child child abuse.
Well, I mean, I agree with I see what you're saying there, and I guess I kind of agree. I don't think you can make this, but like when you tell like a kid like, hey, if you don't obey these edicts, you're gonna go to a fucking eternal realm of torture where you're gonna be burned alive forever and ever. Like, do you think something like that is tantamount to psychological abuse?
You could say so, because it creates a permanent torture chamber in the mind of the individual. Islam is very big on that too. It's very big on the fact that if you don't do exactly what God wants,
no doubt,
you're going to go to hell. And almost everybody's going to go to hell. And then it's very vivid about the fact that in hell you'll be roasted over a flame on a spit until your skin falls off, and you'll scream every minute of the time. And then you'll be given a new skin so that you can start screaming all over again.
Yeah. I feel pretty... Yeah, I feel pretty. I consider myself fairly anti-theistic, and hell is a big part of the reason why. John Holder gave $4.99. Says, "Do you have any concerns about labor conditions in Amazon warehouses? What are your thoughts on UBI and a living wage?" Not really sure who that's for. I'll go ahead and briefly answer it and then toss it to Howard. So as far as the Amazon warehouses go, I've known some people who've worked in Amazon warehouses, and my understanding is the conditions are very, very, very difficult and can be quite brutal, to the point where people hold their pee in because they're afraid of not performing at a fast enough rate to meet their quotas and stuff. So they end up having issues with their bladders and things of that nature. There's been several stories about people dying of heat exhaustion and stuff like that. So I think the conditions in the Amazon warehouses definitely are something that needs to be looked at. As for my thoughts on UBI and a living wage, I support the living wage. I'm a little dubious of the UBI, especially the way that Andrew Yang talked about paying for his particular UBI. It seems kind of circular in its funding, like this idea of a VAT tax on everything. I think it just kind of, I think it disproportionately punishes people who are,
poor.
Yeah, poor. And I also think that you're just going to have every landlord in America raise the rent by whatever the UBI is. So I think it's kind of a lame idea. Now, if you fund the UBI somewhat differently and you fucking have some sort of legislation to account for the ways that price gouging is going to happen, which I don't know exactly how you do that, but if you can do that, I guess maybe it would work, but I don't see how. Howard, what do you think about Amazon warehouse working conditions, UBI, and living wage?
Well, the Amazon warehouse working conditions are going to disappear probably in the next 5 years. Why? Because the automation will grow more. The automation will grow more complete, and then our complaint will be that Amazon is providing enough jobs for American workers.
Another valid complaint, though.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation, and Amazon is a big employer right now. But if I were Jeff Bezos and I could automate these back problems and P problems out of existence, I would. One of the things that Henry Ford used to say is the problem with hiring a new pair of hands is the human who comes with the hands. Right. And we want jobs, but every time we're automated, it produces more jobs. So it's a strange cycle.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how.
Promising.
Yeah, I think it could work, but I think that there's a lot of bugs that need to be worked out. Do you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Neckbeard level 5,000 gave $5 and says, "I think you just proved my point, Howard. FYI, YouTube censored my original argument. Too bad. Would have cost me like $40. It wasn't remotely hateful." I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Well, we have repeats here. Neckbeard's been here before in the print.
Yeah, I think his previous comment was something about the temple in Israel, probably. But I didn't really see what point he's trying to make or whatever. I don't know.
John Holder is a repeat. We've seen him before.
Yeah, sometimes people will. A lot of times you have repeat donations and repeat super chats.
Well, that's neat.
So Brandon Sam, I want to extend a hearty thank you to. Apparently, he really enjoyed this conversation because he donated $300 and did not.
Oh my God, amazing!
Did not say anything. So I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I'm glad that you enjoyed it to such an extent that you felt the need to make such a generous donation. Obviously, I appreciate that tremendously. Mecha Kingzilla gave $5 and says, wouldn't it be better to create more Elon Musk by investing in people instead of allow Elon Musk to expand his own capital? I'm not sure exactly what the argument they're driving at is there, but
it's not better. And the reason is that a leader like an Elon Musk who can take an idea, we all have ideas. We have zillions of them.
Right.
But the difference between an idea and reality is money. And very few people can raise the money and then produce the degree of social organization and belief in his own staff it takes to make an impossible idea happen. A person like that comes along once in a generation. So no matter how much we invest in people, we are still going to be dependent on those few leaders who arise every now and then who are able to galvanize us and make the impossible happen. Thank God for those few leaders who are capable of doing that.
What about people who are good leaders but have stupid ideas? Like, wouldn't it be better to fucking try to figure out a way to empower people who have great ideas but are not necessarily good leaders than it would be to empower people who are good leaders but don't necessarily have good ideas?
Well, empowering people is not up to you and me. Empowering people is up to the organizational ability of the person who is empowered by the fact that other people respond to him and he's able to organize something.
Yeah, but maybe we should figure out some way around that.
There isn't a way around it. There absolutely isn't a way. Look, I was running the biggest PR firm in the music industry. I was credited with totally reinventing what PR in the music industry was, period. There were 20 pages on me, uninterrupted pages on just me, and what I call perceptual engineering in the Billboard Guide to Music Publicity. Right. And I got sick. Now, my staff knew with absolute certainty that I didn't actually add anything to the organization. I just gave money off the top, that they were the ones who were making all of the things that were happening happen.
Right.
And so I came into the office and said, I don't know what's happening to me. I could be dying, but I have to be out of here in 2 weeks, and I'm giving you the company.
Right.
The next day, one of my best competitors out on the West Coast called and offered $350,000 for the company, and I had to tell him, I'm sorry, it's too late. I gave the company to my staff yesterday. You know what happened to that company without leadership? They were gone. In a year, they were gone. They had lost all their clients, and they had to dissolve. Because a charismatic leader is something that comes along rarely. Rarely. And you have to make the most of them.
Gotcha.
He does everything from produces jobs to actually changes the envelope of possibility of human beings.
Okay.
Expands the envelope of possibility for humanity.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly how any of that went down, but you know, I'll take your word for it, being your company and all. Brandon Sam gave another $100. Wow, he's just Mr. Moneybags over there, and says, thanks, TJ. I appreciate the shout out. Well, I appreciate your generous financial contributions to whatever the hell it is I'm doing here. Let's see. Do we have any more donations come in here? Super chat. It looks like we've pretty much bled. We've pretty much bled the audience dry, Howard. I don't think they have any more money. I think we're the only ones left that have any money. Well, I am technically, but hopefully some of them save some money to buy your book, Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me: A Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll. And you know, Howard, I'm going to try to hook you up with some people that we could do a more deep dive into some of this Israeli stuff and some more of your ideas about capitalism as well, if you're cool with that.
Absolutely. Sounds neat to me.
All right, let's do it. Okay, but for now, thank you for joining me. Always fun, always interesting. I don't always find myself agreeing with you, but I always find that you have a unique and interesting approach to any subject matter that's brought up at any given time. You always give me a lot of food for thought, so thank you for being here, and I will see everyone next time, where I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. But, Howard, I'm going to stick around with you for just a second so we can have a little post-stream discussion.
Terrific.
But thank you guys for watching, and I will see everybody later. And, I guess that's it. Once again, Howard's book, Einstein, Michael Jackson, and Me: Search for Soul in the Power Pits of Rock and Roll, and his new documentary, The Grand Unified Theory of Howard Bloom, which both those links available down there in the description. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you had an interesting time. Hope you thought the discussion was fascinating. And I guess I could ask really quick. This little $2 donation came in and asked what your thoughts are on Chomsky, if you want that to be the final thoughts.
He's been very nice to me. He returns my emails from time to time. He's brilliant, but he's diabolical.
Oh, he's a diabolical.
He's horrible. I disagree with him completely. I think he's destructive to the American society and destructive to Israel.
So love him, but hate him. There you go. Right. Final words. See y'all later. Peace the fuck out.